I'm Evelyn, 32 years old, the younger daughter in a very proud family. I thought just maybe Grandpa left me something small, but my parents said it was all for Harper, every last bit. At the will reading, they didn't even save me a seat. Then the lawyer looked at me first, and everything shifted. The house always smelled like cinnamon and old paper. That morning the air was heavier than usual. The fireplace crackled in the corner, though no one was really cold. I stepped into the living room, my heels silent on the hardwood floor, and paused for just a second. They were already there. Harper sitting in the center of the couch like it belonged to her, Mom fussing over the tea set, Dad reading something on his phone, barely looking up. No one said anything when I walked in. No one looked. I cleared my throat lightly. "Hi," I said, more to the room than to anyone in particular. Harper glanced up and gave a quick, rehearsed smile. Mom nodded, still focused on adjusting the teacups. Dad, nothing. I sat down on the farthest edge of the couch where one of the cushions sloped in awkwardly. No one noticed. Or maybe they did, but chose not to. This was the prelude to the family's annual winter brunch, the one Grandpa used to host before his health declined. Now it had become Harper's show. She coordinated everything, sent out the invites, or not chose the menu, and insisted it all be casual, even though she wore a pressed blazer and pearl earrings. I had almost missed the invite this year. It came late. Digital. No greeting. Just a forwarded event link. Still, I came. I glanced at the fireplace mantel. The photo from my graduation was missing. It had always been next to Harper's. Now hers stood alone, perfectly lit by morning light. "Did you move the photos?" I asked, gently, trying not to sound accusatory. "Oh," Mom said, finally acknowledging me. "We're just making space. Harper's award from last month needed a spot." I nodded slowly and looked back at the fire. It had been like this for years. Ever since Harper started working with Dad at the firm, she had become the golden thread that stitched the family together. I had chosen a different path. Community work grants kids with broken homes, less lucrative, less visible, and somehow less respectable. Harper picked up her mug, her pinky elegantly lifted. "Are you still working with kids?" "Still am," I said, letting my voice stay calm. "That's sweet," she replied, like talking about a hobby. I looked over at Mom, who quickly looked away. Dad, as always, stayed focused on his screen. Harper leaned toward Mom and whispered something behind her palm. They both laughed. I reached for my tea. My hand was steady. I didn't ask what was funny. Outside, snow had just started to fall. The living room windows framed it like a holiday card. I wondered if they even noticed how quiet I'd become over the years. How careful. A memory flashed: last year's brunch when Harper had brought out a surprise slideshow of family memories. My face appeared only twice. Once as a toddler. Once at a group shot from 10 years ago. I had smiled, then clapped like everyone else, said nothing. This year felt no different. Until Grandpa's name came up. "We'll go see Grandpa tomorrow," Mom said, her tone shifting. "He's been asking for Harper especially." "Just Harper?" I asked, trying not to sound small. "He's been very specific," Dad finally added, eyes still on his phone. "He's been preparing some things," Harper chimed in. "Legacy stuff, important matters." I nodded again. The tea was cold. Later that day, after Harper had left for her appointment, I stayed behind to help Mom with the dishes. The sink was already half full, but the plates kept piling up, each one scraped clean of the brunch we barely shared. I reached for a dish towel. "You don't have to," Evelyn, Mom said without turning. "I don't mind," I replied. "You're always the one cleaning up." She shrugged. "Harper offered earlier. She's just busy." I dried a plate and set it down with care. There was a heaviness in the air again, a kind of unspoken tension that clung to the corners of the kitchen like dust in old homes. Mom didn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push it. This wasn't new. When I walked back into the living room to grab the last few mugs, I noticed Dad, now on a call, pacing by the window. "Yeah, she's here," he said. "But no, I don't think, well, Harper's already okay. I'll talk to him." He caught me watching. Paused. "It's work," he said quickly. "Nothing to worry about." "Sure," I replied. That evening, back at my apartment, I lit a candle on the windowsill and sat with my coat still on. The city outside was blanketed in soft snow, muffling everything. I thought about Grandpa, about how he used to sneak me butterscotch candies during summer picnics and call me his little historian because I always asked questions about family. We used to talk for hours, especially after Harper became too busy for boring stories. I wondered now if he remembered those conversations or if age had stolen them. The next day, I showed up at the nursing home earlier than expected. The receptionist looked up in surprise. "Harper's already with him," she said. "I'll wait." I sat by the window in the hallway, my hands resting on my lap. Nurses passed. A cart rolled by with Jell-O cups. The clock ticked slow and loud. Finally, the door opened. Harper stepped out, her expression unreadable. "He's tired," she said simply. "You might want to come back tomorrow. I just need 5 minutes." She hesitated, then sighed. "Suit yourself." Inside Grandpa's room was dim but warm. He looked thinner, but his eyes, those clear gray eyes, still held something sharp. "Hi, Grandpa," I said softly, approaching his bedside. "Evie," he said, voice raspy but sure. "You came." "Of course." He reached out and I took his hand. It was dry, the veins prominent, but his grip was strong. "They don't visit enough," he muttered. "I know." He looked at me, then really looked. "I've been watching." "Don't think I haven't." I wasn't sure what he meant, but I nodded. He gestured toward the drawer beside him. "There's something for you in there, but don't open it yet." "Okay." Just then, Mom appeared at the door. "Time's up, Evelyn. He needs rest." I stepped back. Grandpa gave my hand a small squeeze before letting go. Soon, he whispered. In the hallway, Mom didn't speak. She just walked ahead, her steps quick and clipped. When we reached the elevator, she finally said, "Don't make this about you. This isn't the time." I didn't say anything, I replied. "Good, let's keep it that way." At dinner that night, another quiet gathering at Harper's place, the air was full of clinking glasses and small laughs. Harper gave a toast to family and legacy, and everyone applauded. I smiled faintly, said nothing. But in my coat pocket, my fingers brushed something, an envelope Grandpa had slipped into my hand just before I left. I hadn't looked yet. A few days later, I stood outside the family law office, snowflakes catching on my scarf. The appointment wasn't mine, I wasn't invited, but I knew the reading of the will was coming soon. The family had mentioned it in fragments, half-whispered phrases like, "just formality," and "you know who it'll go to anyway." Through the frosted window, I caught a glimpse of Harper inside, speaking confidently to a man in a gray suit. She wore that signature crimson coat, the one Mom had once said made her look like success itself. Her posture was perfect, her smile sharp. I didn't go in. I stood there for a few minutes, letting the cold numb my hands. Then I turned and walked away. Back home, I finally opened the envelope Grandpa had given me. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Handwritten. His cursive was shaky but legible. "You always asked the right questions. Legacy isn't about inheritance, it's about who listens. Keep listening, Evie. I see you. G." My chest tightened. Not from sadness, but from something deeper, recognition. Quiet, steady recognition. That weekend, we had a family brunch again. Harper had just returned from a ski trip in Aspen, and the conversation revolved around her latest investment venture. Dad beamed every time she spoke. Mom filled her plate before anyone else's. When I reached for the bread basket, Harper passed it to someone else without looking at me. I withdrew my hand. No one noticed. The envelope was in my bag. Still folded. Still there. That night, while helping Mom clean the dishes again, I asked softly, "Did Grandpa ever talk to you about the will?" She paused, dish in hand. "No." "Why?" I shook my head. "Just wondering." She turned back to the sink. "Don't get your hopes up, Evelyn. These things are always predictable." I nodded more to myself than to her. Later, alone in my apartment, I lit another candle. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I simply stared at the note again. "I see you." It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But somehow it was enough for now. The morning of the will, reading the air in the house felt different, thick, almost rehearsed. Mom was in the kitchen early arranging pastries on a porcelain tray she only brought out for important family occasions. The coffee was fresh, the napkins were pressed. Everything looked polished, except for me. I came downstairs in a muted gray blouse and black slacks. Simple, quiet. Harper, meanwhile, had on a cream blazer and gold earrings that caught every flicker of light. She was already seated at the dining table, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like she owned the place. Dad walked past me without a word, carrying a folder tucked under his arm. I caught a glimpse of a legal letterhead. "They'll be here at 10, he said, but it wasn't addressed to me. It was more of an announcement into the room to no one in particular. I sat at the far end of the table. No one motioned for me to move closer. 10 o'clock came. The lawyer arrived, Mr. Camden, balding briefcase in hand, glasses sliding down his nose. He greeted everyone with polite nods. Except me. He didn't seem to register me at all. "Shall we begin?" he asked, taking a seat beside Dad. Mom poured coffee for everyone. Everyone except me. Harper smirked when she noticed but said nothing. I reached forward, served myself. As Mr. Camden began speaking formalities, introductions, some legal jargon, Harper sat straighter, clearly anticipating her moment. Every word that hinted at assets made her eyes gleam. Then came the photographs. Mr. Matthews left behind a set of family portraits he asked to be distributed, Camden said, opening an envelope. He handed one to Mom and Dad, then to Harper. Then paused. "And one for Evelyn." His voice landed like a pin drop. I stepped forward to receive mine, but Harper reached first, intercepting the envelope. She looked at the photo Grandpa and me taken in the greenhouse 2 summers ago. I was kneeling, pruning a tomato plant, and he had his hand on my shoulder. She held it out toward me like it was a wet rag. "I don't know why he kept this," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. I took the photo, silently returned to my seat. No one said anything. After that, it was on to the property. The lake house. The stocks, the personal items. Each time a name was called, it was Harper's or Dad's, never mine. I watched the room like a scene unfolding without me. I was present, but not included, not even as an afterthought. Then came the line, "As for the remainder of the estate." Harper leaned forward. Mr. Camden paused, adjusted his glasses. "We'll get to that in a moment." A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Mom reached over, squeezed Harper's hand gently. That's when I realized they'd already talked about this. The outcome had been agreed upon without me. I didn't interrupt. I simply folded my hands in my lap. Camden moved to another topic, Grandpa's journal entries. Apparently, he had left behind handwritten notes that weren't legally binding but carried emotional value. Harper waved her hand. "We don't need to read every sentimental scribble." Actually, Camden said he insisted this be read aloud. That made her sit up straighter. Camden flipped to a marked page, cleared his throat. "I've made mistakes in how I showed affection. Some children are loud, others are quiet. But the quiet ones, they see everything. Silence. No one looked at me, but I felt the weight of it. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just listened." Harper exhaled through her nose and crossed her arms. The tension was palpable, but no one said a word. As Mr. Camden closed the journal, the room seemed suspended in silence, like even the air didn't dare move. Harper shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. Dad cleared his throat, but it came out dry. Mom pretended to adjust her napkin. "I suppose we should continue," Camden said, resuming his legal tone. "Now the matter of the trust fund allocations." Harper leaned forward again, expectant. "That's under my name, right?" Camden didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another folder, this one bound in green leather. Harper's fingers tapped the table. "Dad said Grandpa already." Miss Harper. Camden interrupted gently, but firmly. "I will read the document exactly as requested." Her mouth clamped shut. He began to read. To Harper Matthews. "I leave the lake property and the art collection stored within the south wing." She exhaled in relief. A soft smile returned to her face. That's more like it. With the exception of the 3 paintings acquired in 1973, which are to remain in the family vault under Evelyn Matthews's discretion. Harper's head snapped toward me. What Camden didn't repeat it. He just moved on. To Evelyn Matthews, he said, his tone steady. I leave the following. I didn't lean in. I didn't move at all. No one else breathed. But Camden didn't continue right away. He took a sip of water, flipped a page, then read, my shares in Harper Dell Investments totaling 47% ownership. Dad straightened. That can't be right. Camden held up the paper. It's signed, witnessed, filed. Harper's mouth opened, then closed. She looked to Mom, who just shook her head in disbelief. She hasn't even been involved with the company, Harper protested. She's not even in finance. I remained quiet. Camden continued. Mr. Matthews made it clear that the shares were to be held in Evelyn's name without management interference. He wrote, she won't need their guidance. She already knows how to listen where others speak too loud. That line hung in the air like smoke. I looked down at my hands. Calm. Still. Harper stood up. This is absurd, Harper Dad warned. No. This is favoritism reversed. You told me. Mom touched her arm. Sit down. I won't. Harper's voice cracked. She's always been the ghost in this family. She barely talks. She doesn't even... I'm still here, I said softly. It was the first time I'd spoken since the meeting began. Everyone turned to look at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even raise my eyes. But it was enough to make Harper fall silent. Camden nodded toward me. There's more. He read a short statement from Grandpa written in his final days. The one who watched, who waited, who never needed to prove her worth with noise, that's the one I trust to carry my legacy. Harper sat down slowly. No one else said anything. The lawyer closed the file. That concludes today's proceedings. But no one moved. The coffee had gone cold, the pastries untouched. Dad finally spoke. We'll reconvene to discuss logistics. Camden nodded, packed his briefcase. As he stood, he paused and turned to me. Your grandfather spoke highly of you. He said you reminded him of your grandmother. She didn't speak much either, but when she did, everyone listened. I nodded. Harper looked away. I tucked the journal closer to my side and stood walking toward the door. Behind me, I heard the soft clink of Harper's spoon falling against her untouched coffee cup. The hallway outside the study was lined with faded family portraits, each one more stoic than the last. I paused in front of one of Grandpa as a young man, military uniform, stern jaw, eyes forward. I wondered what he'd seen in me, what he thought I'd carry that others couldn't. From inside, I could still hear Harper's voice rising and falling. Words like unfair, manipulated, silent for years floated out in fragments. I didn't stop walking. By the time I reached the veranda, the cold air had sobered the heat that was creeping into my chest. The sky was shifting, clouds softening into that washed blue before dusk. I stood quietly. Let the cold touch my skin. Let everything settle. The door behind me opened. I didn't turn. It was Mom. She walked up beside me, wrapped in her thick gray shawl. Her voice was low, uncertain. You should have told us you were still close with him. I kept my eyes on the lawn. He always said you were distant, she added. Quiet. I thought maybe he misunderstood. I finally turned. Maybe that's why we got along. She gave a small laugh. He did say that once, that you listen like her. It took a beat before I realized who she meant. Grandma. The woman whose voice had been quiet but final. The one everyone remembered but no one quoted. Mom sighed, pulling her shawl tighter. I didn't know he left you that much. Neither did I. She nodded. Still, I suppose he saw something. A beat passed. I think we all did, she said, softer now. We just didn't say it out loud. I turned back to the yard. That was the pattern, wasn't it? She didn't answer. The moment hung there, fragile but not empty. When she left, I stayed. Back inside, I passed by the dining room again. Harper was seated at the head of the table, elbows on the edge, both hands cradling her forehead. Dad stood behind her, rubbing her shoulder. Their voices were low now. No more fire. I walked past without stopping. At the front of the house, I saw Mr. Camden speaking with a driver. He noticed me, nodded once respectfully. I nodded back. "Miss Matthews," he said, walking over. "If you're ready, I have the papers for the trust transition. We don't have to rush. I'll review them next week." He hesitated. "Your grandfather?" He asked that you read the journal privately, not share it unless you chose to. I nodded. "I understand." He looked at me for a moment longer, as if measuring something he wasn't sure could be spoken, then gave a brief smile. He was very proud. When he left, I finally sat on the front steps, the journal resting beside me. I didn't open it again that day. Just let my hands rest on the leather cover. From behind me through the open window came the sound of chairs moving, dishes clinking, a home rearranging itself. I didn't need to go back in. Not anymore. The morning of the will reading arrived with a strange quietness, like the pause before snowfall. The Matthews house, usually so loud with overlapping voices and the clink of dishes, was still. The only sound was the ticking of the tall grandfather clock in the foyer. The lawyer, Mr. Camden, had requested everyone gather in the drawing room by 10. The space had been cleared of its usual clutter. No holiday decorations, no wine glasses, just high-backed chairs arranged in a neat arc and a stack of heavy folders resting on the mahogany coffee table. I took the seat farthest from the center beside a curtained window. No one greeted me. Harper walked in fashionably late as always, wrapped in a deep plum coat that looked custom-fitted. She didn't look at me. Mom and Dad followed, sitting on either side of her like bookends in a tableau they'd rehearsed. Mr. Camden entered last, placing his leather briefcase on the table. "Good morning," he said, voice calm, measured. "Thank you for coming. I'll proceed as instructed." He clicked open the brass latches on the case and pulled out a single envelope yellowed and sealed in wax. "This is your grandfather's final will and testament. It supersedes all previous versions." A rustle moved through the room. Mr. Camden slid on his glasses and began to read. The opening lines were formal, naming full legal identities, dates, the executor clause. Then came the pause. He glanced up over his frames. "I'll begin with the specific bequests." Harper straightened. "To my granddaughter, Harper Elaine Matthews, I leave my collection of first edition books and the contents of the wine cellar. These she always admired." Harper tilted her chin slightly. A tight smile formed. "To my daughter-in-law Margaret and my son Jonathan, I leave the cabin in Maine, for years of shared silence and few demands." Mom looked over at Dad, confused. His jaw twitched. Mr. Camden flipped a page. "And to my granddaughter, Evelyn Claire Matthews." The room shifted. Everyone turned toward me, as if only now remembering I was there. "I leave the entirety of the remaining estate, including properties, investments, and my personal journal." A beat passed. No one spoke. Harper blinked. "What?" Mr. Camden cleared his throat. "That includes the Denver property, the Oregon retreat, the trust fund, and all residual assets. Estimated value at the time of signing $32 million. A silence deeper than before filled the room. I didn't move. Mom looked stunned. Dad leaned forward slightly as if needing to hear it again. Harper shot to her feet. He didn't mean that. He was old, confused. He didn't even speak to her in the last 2 years. Mr. Camden remained calm. He spoke to her every Thursday. I arranged the calls myself. Harper's voice cracked. "She's not even part of this family," I stood. Not abruptly. No anger in the gesture. Just enough to shift the weight of the room. "I was never absent," I said, voice quiet but steady. "You just stopped looking." Harper stepped back like the words had pushed her. She started, but nothing came out. Mom looked down. Dad stayed still. Mr. Camden reached into his case again and retrieved a small leather-bound book. "Your grandfather asked that Miss Matthews receive this directly." He handed it to me. I took it with both hands. On the front cover, etched faintly into the leather, were the initials ECM, my name. Not Harper's, not his own. Mine. I didn't sit back down. Holding the journal felt heavier than its weight. I didn't need to open it. Not yet. Just the feel of the leather worn smooth along the edges told me everything. He'd touched it often, written in it often. chosen it carefully, just like he had chosen this moment. Mr. Camden continued reading formalities, but the room no longer heard him. Harper was pacing now, arms crossed her heels, clicking sharply against the floor. This is absurd. There must be a mistake. You can't just skip over your entire family and give everything to her. Her voice landed like stones thrown at still water. She's his granddaughter, Mr. Camden replied simply. As are you. His decisions are clear. Mom still hadn't looked at me. Her fingers toyed with the hem of her blouse. Dad shifted his gaze between me and the window as if searching for some other narrative to cling to. Harper turned to them. Say something. Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad's mouth was pressed into a flat line. He always did what he wanted. He muttered. We shouldn't be surprised. You agreed with him, Harper snapped. You knew about this? No, Dad said. But I can't say I blame him. That landed like a slap. Harper reeled. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I stayed standing, both hands still resting on the journal. Mr. Camden closed the folder gently. The rest of the legal documents will be sent for signing. I'll leave you all to process. He nodded once and walked out. The moment the door clicked shut, silence filled every inch of the room again. No one moved. Eventually, I turned. I didn't address anyone. I didn't make a speech. I simply walked toward the door. Halfway there, Harper's voice cut through, quieter now, almost shaky. Why you? I paused, but I didn't turn. She asked again, louder. Why you, Evelyn? You never tried. You weren't even here. I looked back over my shoulder, not angry, not smug. You stopped inviting me, I said. Then I pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway. It was brighter there. Sunlight spilled through the skylight, catching the dust motes in the air. Behind me, I heard no footsteps. No one followed. Outside, the air felt different, lighter but not yet freeing. I sat on the front steps for a while, the journal resting in my lap unopened. A few birds chirped from the tree Grandpa used to trim himself. The same tree I once climbed as a kid before Harper told me I'd ruin my dress. I stayed there until the front door creaked open behind me. Dad. He didn't sit down. He just stood, hands in pockets. I should have stood up for you more, he said. I didn't respond. After a moment, he added, Your grandfather, he believed in legacy, not noise. I nodded once. When he turned and went back inside, he didn't close the door all the way. It stayed ajar, like maybe something had shifted, even if just a crack. I opened the journal. On the first page in his handwriting it read, To Evelyn, not because you're loud, but because you listened. The lump in my throat formed slowly, not heavy, just full. I turned the page and began to read. The entries weren't long. Some were barely more than a few lines, but each one was clear, specific, and intentional. Evelyn called today. She asked about the war medals. Not many people think to ask why I boxed them. Harper bought me a shirt. Wrong size, wrong style. Said I should try wearing something more modern. I miss Evelyn's quiet questions. I left the garden untended this week. My back's acting up again. I remember when Evelyn used to sit by the hedge humming to herself while I trimmed. She never asked for attention. She just stayed. Each note felt like a whisper from a past I hadn't known he'd kept track of. He remembered. All the small moments I thought had vanished into dust, he'd written them down, preserved them, as if even in silence I'd mattered. And it wasn't about money. The journal didn't hold dollar signs. It held proof. Proof that someone had seen me. Really seen me. Not for what I tried to prove, but for who I already was. And for someone who had spent years tiptoeing around a family where volume equaled value, it was the only validation I'd ever wanted. A shadow crossed the page. I looked up. Harper stood there, still inside the doorway, one hand gripping the frame. Her expression wasn't angry. Not anymore. It was hollow. She took a tentative step forward. I didn't know he was writing that. I didn't either, I said, closing the journal gently. She hesitated, then asked, Do you hate me? I thought for a moment before answering. No, I said. I think I just stopped expecting anything. That answer seemed to sting more than a yes would have. She nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. "I was always afraid," she said. "Afraid he'd see you." "He did," I replied. And that was the difference. She lingered there, then turned back inside. I didn't watch her go. The wind picked up a little, rustling the hedges. Somewhere in the house I could hear muffled voices, my parents maybe trying to make sense of what had just happened, maybe still clinging to their version of order, but that was no longer mine to carry. I tucked the journal into my bag and stood. Before I left, I walked around the side of the house. The garden was still there, overgrown in parts, but the bones were strong. Grandpa's design had always favored resilience. I knelt by the old stone bench, brushed away the dried leaves, and sat. From here I could see the swing set we used as kids. The wooden frame had faded and one chain hung loose, but it still stood. Like me, maybe. Quiet, weathered, and still standing. I didn't need a grand goodbye, no dramatic exits. I stayed until the sun dipped just behind the roof, casting long golden rays across the lawn. Then I rose, walked to my car, and drove off. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. They'd seen. And this time, no one laughed. Some victories aren't loud. They don't come with applause or spotlight. Sometimes they sound like a room falling quiet, like someone remembering what they tried to forget, like a name spoken first finally after years of silence. And in that quiet, something shifts. Not for revenge, but for recognition.